Okay guys, welcome back, and today I want to show you this chart that I had made. It was a while ago, and it was inspired by God for me to put this together. And when I do Bible study and I do research with the Bible and so forth, I like to have a timeline. The timeline gives me an opportunity to see, like, okay, what was going on during this time. But what I also wanted to do is I also wanted to just show some references of the giants that were mentioned in the Bible. I've talked with people and they say, well, I've never seen it. Well, okay, it is mentioned in the Bible, the King James Version, and other Bibles as well, but I just stick to the King James Version with this. So, and there's another couple things that I wanted to tell you about this, is that I was doing some research on end times and the third temple and days of weeks and thousands of years and so forth. And I found some pretty interesting things. So let me just zoom into this thing and let's just take a look what we have here, right? So I'm going to come over here. And we can see that over here in the Great Flood, what I'm assuming, and these numbers, again, everything on here, you can do your own research. There's probably a few things that are off a little bit. But what I'm assuming is that the way mathematics works, okay, God at the beginning of creation, around 4000 BC, a little bit before that, but he created, okay, Adam and Eve. So there were basically two people. So from that two persons all the way up through the time of the Great Flood, which is big, huge line right here, okay, I'm predicting that there was about 3 billion people on Earth at that time, right? And we're talking about a time of 4,000, say 1,000, 1,500, 1,600, 1,650. So right there, about that spot, I'm taking that number and going to about 3 billion people. Now, after that point, okay, we'll take that from the flood. We'll start with 8 people, do the math. Math doesn't lie. And it now brings you up to around where we are here, just a little bit later, okay, at about 8 billion people. Now, that's very interesting because we're looking at the time before the flood. So let me kind of zoom in on this a little bit. See that a little bit better? Okay. And there's a lot of things that we find archaeologically and in the Bible, archaeological finds and so forth, and also the genealogies of the people that lived during that time. So you can basically take the numbers, like Adam lived to 930 years, Methuselah 969, Noah 950 years that he lived. And if you take that timeline right there, just him alone, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob could have even known Noah and given them all this information, what had happened and what was going on, way deep in here before the flood. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. What this particular chart has to talk about is that all over the entire world, there were, and even in the Americas, South America, North America, all these islands and the Solomon Islands, all over the world, we're finding examples of where giants lived at that time. We're finding temples, we're finding megaliths, we're finding all types of dolmens and so forth, and these are megalithic sites in incredible sizes, some of them. Now, what I want to tell you is this: is that if, say, like this right here is times, is this 0 day? The United States itself started, here's 50, 100, 150, 200. That right there is 200 years right there. There's 250. So that right there, that small period from here to here is the entire time of the United States of America. So we started with Native Americans. We had people come over from Europe and Plymouth Rock, the whole thing. All these wars that were going on within that time. But here we are about right here in this range of a timeline. Think about, just for a minute, now we're sending men to the moon. We're sending people, we're going to be sending people to Mars shortly. If, the rapture doesn't happen sooner or later, we'll see. But anyway, so all of this short amount of time. But think about what was going on before the flood, as Jesus said, as in the time of Noah, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. So what was actually going on before the flood? And this is just 250 years. Think of 1,650 years of what could have been going on during that time. Now, think of this for instance. During the time that Adam walked with God, Okay, this was before sin, right? He walked with God, and he talked with him. He learned things from him. He named all the animals and all of that. But it's absolutely fascinating that within all of that, all of a sudden, is that the reason why we started creating all of these different types of temples and archaeological buildings and so forth back in the day? Was it all for God, or was it all for evil or some other purpose? That's what I'm trying to get at here. So if you know about the giants, so what happened was the angels had come down, okay? Angels came down that were basically mixed up with Satan. Satan says, hey, I'm going to make everybody a god here. We're going to defeat God, and you just follow me, and it's all going to happen. All you have to do is, you 200 of you, you're going to go down and just start impregnating the world. Find any women of your choosing and get them pregnant, and their offspring are going to be Nephilim, and the whole genetic genome of humans is going to be erased. It's going to turn into something else. So as you know, the genome, okay, was going to be disturbed. So God said to Noah, your family or you are the last ones basically that have a clean genetic makeup. Everything else and all the other people within that time are completely evil. Now what I have down here, okay, and I'm gonna flood the earth and get rid of all of that filth, all of that evilness, okay? We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to start off fresh and new. The line is going to continue, and then Jesus is going to be born through Mary. So if you take a look at this here in the book of Enoch, now some people say, well, the book of Enoch is, I'm just looking at things that I research and find, whether or not this book was talked about in the Bible, which it was, and the fragments have they found and so forth. Well, here's some of the scripture from that. It says, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits of flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. So these original angels had come down to watch over the people before the flood. But what happened was, after they got enticed by Satan, they started giving us knowledge, okay? And that's where a lot of these buildings here came in. How do you do this? How do you build these things, And I have up here the Sphinx before the flood, also the Great Pyramids. I'm not sure about that. This could be just right after this point, around here, so in the Egyptian Empire early on, fine. But there's also evidence that it was a little bit before that period as well. And that was right there. That was from Enoch. So it's basically telling you what that was. Produced from the spirits and flesh. Okay? And then down here in the book of Jasher, it talks about their judges and rulers. Okay? Judges and rulers during this time, okay, taught the mixture of animals of one species with the other. What is that about? Isn't that kind of something like that we're doing today? We're trying to mix up all of this DNA and trying to make two animals into one in order therewith to provoke the Lord. So what was going on back in this time before the flood was a lot of evil. Humans were being destroyed genetically, and all of this genetic manipulation happening with animals as well. So now, after the flood, what we have here, very interestingly, is we're down to 8 people. Now, as you can see, from 8 people here, 50, 100, 150, about 200 years just later, like the age of the United States of America, so it's the founding of it. I'm just going off of that timeline. Look at all of these things that were created within that time. We got Nimrod, which was a giant, because it says that giants were after as well. And not only before the flood, but they were also after the flood. Now, Nimrod was a giant, and he created basically the Tower of Babel. Now, there's some people that say that Ham fathered the Canaanite giants. We knew that the Canaanites were giants, along with all of these other ones here, the Amalekites, the Amorites, Anakims, and so forth. And those were part of the tribes that lived around Israel at the time. Then Moses freed the people from Egypt. Basically, they roamed around for 40 years, but after that, they were going around and they were starting to take out all of these evil tribes that were going on during that time. And these were giants, again, David and Goliath. So we're looking at David and Goliath. Where's he? Solomon's temple was built here. There's King Saul and David. So there were still giants all the way all the way at least up to here that we know of. So we're talking about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years later, we still got giants. This is where, Moses was with the Ten Commandments, and Aaron, Joshua, Caleb. Now, let me just go to a couple scriptures here first. Genesis. There were giants in the earth in those days. And it says in the earth, we're finding remnants of caves that they believe giants used to live in. Okay, so they used to use these gigantic caverns and caves, and that's where they were living. They would come out, they would eat people, take people at will, bring them in there, and basically they were cannibals. But it says that there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, which we just looked at up here. They were after the flood as well. Okay, talking about this. When the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Now that right there is from the King James Version. Now over in Numbers it says, and they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all of the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. Now, we can look at people today and we can say, okay, he's like 6'5". He's pretty big, but when we say men of great stature, we're talking people that are 15 feet tall, 20 feet tall. These people were huge, okay? And in Numbers 13:33 it says, and there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come from the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So these people absolutely were huge. I'm not going to read all of these, but we can take a look at this. It says, the sons of Anakims, Zamzumims, Emims, and the Amamites. It's talking about which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Emims. So it's interesting, that's an interesting fact, because if someone was just to write that down, okay, well, we'll just take it for words. But you know what? The Moabites over there are calling them a different thing. So they knew what they were, okay? Even though these certain tribes that, didn't talk to each other, they all hated each other, basically, were calling those giants by a different name. And also, the 2:20:21, that also was accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelled therein in old time. And the Amamites called them Zamzumims. Another one that is interesting here is 3:11, Deuteronomy. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath, children of Ramon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man, which is 13.4 feet by 6 feet. I mean, that's huge. Let me zoom out a little bit. So the other thing here is, if the tribe of Israel and other tribes, because you think about it, the giants were so huge, how could they possibly get all of this food and supplies and so forth, and while at the same time trying to fight off the tribes of Israel? So what I'm thinking is that during this time, and we're talking 1,000, 2,000 years, just in that time alone, I'm not even going to go over here, right? But within this time, they were traveling, okay, around the world. They were going from one place to another, trying to find a place where they can, take their families and so forth, their giant families, and then just live off the land, find caves and so forth. I mean, it's just very interesting. I'm just saying that's how I think that they found the evidence here. Let me zoom in. Okay. They're finding evidence of giant tribes were discovered in the Americas in the 1800s, including Catalina Island, Lompoc Rancho, California, Iowa, Beaver Lake, Ozarks Caves in Arkansas, okay, Montgomery County, Serpent Mount, okay, they allude to that there were giants there as well, Steelville, Missouri, Cresap Mound, West Virginia, Lake Delavan, Wisconsin. So, and those are just the ones that we found. And what was happening was people that when they first started coming over to the country, the new world here in the United States, they started working their way across the United States. And to try to find a place to live, so they were farming and they were tilling the land. And next thing you know, they start pulling out these bones. And they're saying, look at the size of this human bone, this femur. So what they did was they took those bones and they sent them off to the Smithsonian Institution and these places with their scientists and so forth and their researchers, and they never saw them again. The other interesting thing about this timeline, which I didn't even realize until I was putting it together, because we have Solomon's temple here, right there, okay? We've got Jesus crucified a little bit after. There's the destruction. That, by the way, that gold area is the time that the temple was actually still erected. Over here was Herod's temple, and now we're waiting for the third temple. But take a look at this right here. When you put this timeline together, we have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. And then this other 7,000 is a day of rest. Now, you can take it literally. You can just say, hey, well, that kind of makes sense. Maybe that's something that was spoke about in the Bible, but it's almost as if things deal with the number 7, like the days that were creation. God created the earth and the heavens in 6 days and rested on the 7th. So here we go. Day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 rested on the 7th during that 1,000-year millennium. I just put that on here, but I was putting this together. I noticed like, wow. Look at this. Where the temple was built, and then 1,000 years later, there's Jesus right there. It's really interesting. Now, what's interesting is that you follow all of the Minoan civilization, Egyptian, the Assyrians, the Babylonians here. Okay, remember the Babylonians are the ones that actually destroyed that temple. Okay, Medo-Persia and the Greek Empire. Now, interesting enough, over here, back in this time, okay, around 70 AD or so, right now, Israel exiled and scattered among the heathen world. Let me zoom in a little bit, you can see this a little better. There. This green line shows you the time that Israel was exiled from their land. And then at the end, Israel became a nation again, a state in 1948. Now, all of the death and killing that went on over all of these years, think of all the people that have died, all the wars, all of this combined, And look at this. Just in the last, by the way, you see how this turns this kind of like a reddish color? So it gets worse and worse and worse all the way up to here. It's going to get bad, 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 and all of a sudden, boom, God just destroys it and says, that's it, well, I'm done with you, right? Same thing with this one. Goes all the way through here, and then sure enough, it gets red again, and it gets reaching this point because look what happened. Hitler, 7 million people. Stalin, 30 million. Mao, 3. Hiroshima, 250,000. Nagasaki. I mean, Darwinism, evolution came in all of this time. So this is a really disgusting time that we're living in during here. All of these people just dying, and there were more. Pol Pot, okay, Khmer Rouge, 20 million people. The Armenian massacre, 1.2 million. I mean, what's going on? And if you notice, with all of this evil that we have in this world, what's going on at the same time? Right here. Okay? This genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence. What's going on here? Look it up. Just in the last 100 or so years, we got hydrogen, uranium, plutonium bombs, nuclear fission, neutron bombs. I mean, God said that we are going to destroy ourselves if he does not come back and save us. The Native Americans are saying, well, they had giants living in the U.S., okay, hidden up there, taking their tribe members and cannibalizing them, eating them, so they finally put some of them to death. And one woman had the actual, after they killed them, so forth, she took the red hair. They're saying these giants had red hair, and she made it into a necklace with some beads and so forth, representing that we finally killed them off. But over here, it says, and there went out a champion. Okay, this is the Philistines, Goliath, and so a champion out of the camp of Philistines named Goliath of Gath. Okay, I believe he also had a brother too, another giant, but whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So that's 9.5 feet. We're talking guys playing in the NBA, 7 feet. These guys are nothing. This is 9 feet, 9.5 feet. And this is one of the smaller ones out there. His spear weighed 15 pounds. These were born unto the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of the servants. So all of these giants are what? They're all falling, they're dying. We're getting rid of them slowly, but at the same time, they're also making their way over to Asia, through the Americas, through Russia, all of the islands. They could sail, they got boats, they were moving and going from place to place and setting up these megaliths. And got to remember too that back in this time here, again, the Watchers had come down giving humans information that we were not supposed to know. They were giving us knowledge, forbidden knowledge for us, like how to levitate gigantic boulders, how to, start fires, how to do this and that. After the fall of man, after, the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it got really bad, and it got bad fast. But think of all of these years combined, and all these Watchers and all that stuff happening, all the knowledge that we had to create all of this stuff. And then after Noah knew this. He knew what was going on, okay, and his family members. So after that, first thing that Nimrod does right here, he builds a gigantic tower already, and that's just within 100 years of this, after the flood. At that point, God's saying, look, Abraham, I need you. We need to get this thing going. We need to start a tribe of Israel to get rid of these things. And that's when they started taking off and going around all over the world. So that's what this chart is about. And feel free, I'm gonna leave it in the video section right there so you can get this. It's on my website in case you wanted to pass it on to somebody else. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.